What's good? It's Woog. I wanted to thank you for giving me some feedback after I just, had a little fun with the Led Zeppelin catalog, or at least, the first 6 albums of the Led Zeppelin catalog, and I ranked them in terms of my personal favorite albums. So that was excluding Presence and In Through the Outdoor. Those two were excluded. So I'm just talking the first 6 albums. And then I checked some of the feedback that I got from you guys, both on, YouTube, on Instagram, and on TikTok, actually. And I just wanted to kind of elaborate on why I picked, or rather ranked them in the way that I did. So at number 6, I had the first album, Led Zeppelin. I had that last. Out of these 6, I had that debut album. Number 6, I had the third album, Led Zeppelin 3. As number 5, I had Led Zeppelin 2 as number 4, which, I predictably got a lot of blowback on that one. 2, a lot of people like. And just ahead of that, at number 3, I had Houses of the Holy. Number 2, I had Physical Graffiti. And then at number 1, I had the untitled Led Zeppelin 4. And I also got a lot of pushback on that one. A lot of people wanted to see Physical Graffiti at number 1, which, I could get, let's just get into it. The first album, the debut, it's a good album. It's, blues on steroids, essentially. Most of the songs were already written by past blues artists, so it's a lot of covers, but again, instrumentally, they just put their own twist on it. So who would the contemporaries have been at the time? I mean, Led Zeppelin in itself was an extension of the Yardbirds. So, at a point they were called the New Yardbirds. So you would have to look to, early Fleetwood Mac. I'm talking like the Peter Green led Fleetwood Mac. Who else? John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, Cream. So those would be some of the Led Zeppelin contemporaries. I know there are a bunch of others. Let me know in the comments some of the ones that come to mind in terms of just those super good blues on steroids types of bands in the late 60s. But one of the things that made Led Zeppelin so special is that they were essentially a super band of sorts. I mean, if you think about it, John Bonham aside, with his crushing drums and JPJ on the keys and also on the bass. Obviously, Jimmy Page is viewed as a guitar god, one of the few greatest. A lot of people will say, oh no, this person's better than Jimmy Page or that person's better than Jimmy Page. But let's keep it real. Between the guitar riff songwriting and the guitar solos, and him being able to peel it back and to go acoustic on songs like Going to California or that Bront Eeyore, from disc 2 on Physical Graffiti, Jimmy Page is, just on another planet, right? But then to also have a vocalist like Robert Plant who's able to conjure up this howl, almost like a Janis Joplin like howl. Who would be the other vocalist that could even compete with that from that era? When it came to, a lot of the British blues-based bands. Mick Jagger didn't sing like that. Roger Daltrey had a great voice. I give you that. But, you would have to really look to, Paul Rogers, from Free, and then later on from Bad Company, who was actually signed to Led Zeppelin's Swan Song. But yeah, let's get into some of the rationale behind the way that I rank these. As I mentioned, the debut was a very good album. Dazed and Confused, You Shook Me. It opened up with Good Times, Bad Times, and then my favorite song on that album, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. That's that dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Even the acoustic piece that leads, that introduces the song is brilliant. But yeah, that's one of those first early Led Zeppelin songs where you get the full impact of that Robert Plant howl, especially when they start repeating the chorus, that chorus guitar line towards the end of the song where he almost sounds, it sounds pretty ethereal. There's just this instrumental and vocal sorcery that goes on with Led Zeppelin. So again, I had that last, and that's because, you can't really find an album within that first 6 album run that Led Zeppelin was on that the debut album is better than. Let me know if you disagree. But at number 5, I've got number 3, or rather Led Zeppelin 3. So this actually includes one of my favorite songs, and that is Since I've Been Loving You. I actually see that as being Robert Plant's greatest vocal performance. It's just a blues on steroids masterpiece. Just the different sections of the song and the way that it kind of builds up until you get those final solos and splashes via Jimmy Page. You've got Robert Plant singing like he's trying to save the universe with his voice by the end of this thing. It's just a beautiful Led Zeppelin song. Since I've Been Loving You, that's on the Led Zeppelin 3 album. The album kicks off with immigrant song, which just has this riveting pace. So Led Zeppelin 3, very good album. I also like the song That's the Way. I think Friends and Celebration Day are both quality songs. I like Gallows Pole, and there's also a Bron Eyor Stomp. Now, as I mentioned, there was a beautiful acoustic piece on disc 2, track 2 on Physical Graffiti called Bron Eyor, and Bron Eyor Stomp is on the third album. That Bron Eyor on Physical Graffiti that came out years later was actually written and recorded in the Led Zeppelin 3 recording sessions. So they just held on to that one. They didn't put it on the album, which I don't know why. I mean, there is more of an acoustic guitar presence on Led Zeppelin 3. It's a little bit more folky than its two predecessors, so it just seems like that Bron Eyor guitar, like a 2-minute beautiful enchanting acoustic guitar piece, it feels like it would have fit right in with that Led Zeppelin 3 album. But again, it wasn't on there. But Led Zeppelin 3, good album. I've got it at number 5, and then I've got Led Zeppelin 2 at number 4. And I mean, this is the one that kicks off with Whole Lotta Love. I look at that as being probably Led Zeppelin's second most iconic song, with number 1 being Stairway to Heaven. So it's got the classic that is Whole Lotta Love. And when it comes to people saying, kind of dismissing the classics because they've heard it so many times, whether it's on rock radio or at karaoke bars, wherever, right? Or people doing covers of them, whatever. Just because you got tired of a song over hearing it so many times over the past few decades doesn't take away from how great of a song it was. So, for instance, I'm sure some people would penalize Led Zeppelin 4's Stairway to Heaven because they're just tired of it. But it's like, if Stairway to Heaven wasn't created at that time and it came out today as a brand new song, it would be a new classic all over again. Even though rock and roll doesn't have the same ubiquity in the mainstream of music that it did in the 60s and 70s. I get that. So it's not apples to apples era wise. But I'm just saying, Stairway to Heaven stands the test of time. It's a great song, whether you were listening to it in the 70s, in the 80s, 90s, and so forth. So just because something has kind of reached the pinnacle of legendary rock and roll immortality doesn't mean that you penalize it because it is so all over the place, right? So Whole Lotta Love, undeniably great. It kicks off the Led Zeppelin 2 album. And this was so transformative that they kind of changed radio. I mean, FM radio was largely, derived out of the necessity to be able to play longer songs, or like the whole side of a disc from an album. Led Zeppelin was notoriously anti-single, so they weren't just shelling out 3 to 4 minute singles to be played on radio. Instead, radio stations would be forced to play like the 6 to 8 minute Whole Lotta Love song in its entirety. So there is that. And it's got Heartbreaker. That's that famous guitar riff. It's got Living Loving Maid, which a lot of people could kind of take it or leave it. I feel like Living Loving Maid, Communication Breakdown from their first album, and maybe Misty Mountaintop on Led Zeppelin 4 are, 3 tracks that are kind of like a little bit more middle of the road. They just kind of blend. I mean, they're not terrible songs. They just kind of, I feel they pale in comparison to a lot of what else is featured in their discography. But yeah, Living Loving Maid is on 2 as well. The Lemon Song, I mean, Jimmy Page just goes nuts on guitar on this album's track 3, the Lemon Song. It's also got What Is and What Should Never Be. A lot of people really love that song. I don't love it. I mean, I like it, but it's not one of my favorite from Led Zeppelin. Same applies to Thank You. Some people, I mean, I've had friends who said that they wanted Thank You to be like their walk-in wedding song. I don't like Thank You like that. I mean, it's a little too sappy for me, but I get it. And then it's got Ramble On, which is one of those undeniable songs. And then it's got Moby Dick that has the iconic drum solo from Bonzo, John Bonham. So Moby Dick, I mean, that's an instrumental. There are no words on Moby Dick. And then they close it out with Bring It On Home, which features in the first minute to a minute and a half of that song. It's got Robert Plant basically doing his best blues singer imitation. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's got him kind of doing certain inflections. Watch out. But all in all, Bring It On Home is a pretty good song, and it's a good way to close this 2 albums. And I've got that one at number 4. And the reason I have Houses of the Holy ahead of this, I put Houses of the Holy at number 3. It's because, look, where you place Houses of the Holy depends on what you think of those first 3 songs. Song remains the same. the Rain Song, the Rain Song, which I love. That's one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. Such a beautiful instrumental before it even really gets into the lyrics, and then it starts to build, and it's got a whole different vibe by the second half of it where it's a little bit more explosive, but it really is beautiful acoustically, instrumentally. Robert Plant's a little bit more tender in the vocals until he starts howling, closer to the end of the song. And then there's Over the Hills and Far Away, which, I usually compare that one with What Is and What Should Never, the track 2 on the second album. I prefer Over the Hills and Far Away. So that trio of opening songs, the song remains the same, the Rain Song and Over the Hills of Far Away. If you love those songs, or at least love 2 out of those 3, then you would probably have Houses of the Holy ranked pretty high among Led Zeppelin albums. If you're not a huge fan of those songs, I could see Houses of the Holy being ranked number 4, 5, or even 6, but I've got it at number 3. I don't love the song The Crunch. It's okay. Same thing with Dancing Days. Not a huge fan of those songs. They're okay to me. Dear Maker, some people really like it. That's the reggae inspired one. Oh, 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 oh. Some people really like that one. Some people don't. I thought it was a kind of a creative, concoction of different styles. So I like Dear Maker more than Dancing Days and The Crunch and its confounded bridge. The bridge. And then the last 2 songs on Houses of the Holy are No Quarter and The Ocean. The Ocean is just an overall good rocker. And then No Quarter, it's a little bit darker. It's pretty psychedelic. It's a little woozy. It's a little trippy. It's a little spooky. Like some of my hip hop buddies in the early 2000s used the opening, kind of that little spooky keyboardish thing that takes place in the beginning of No Quarter. They use that as a part of the sample. They use those opening few seconds of No Quarter in one of their hip hop beats. I thought it was pretty creative, but yeah, No Quarter and its originality was one of the reasons I have Houses of the Holy this high in the catalog. So I think that the album opens extremely strong with those first 3 songs, and then it closes strong with those final 2 songs. It's only The Crunch and then Dancing Days that's a little bit more forgettable for me, and then Dear Maker, your taste may vary on that one. So Houses of the Holy I had at number 3, and by the way, in terms of its chronology, it's between, in terms of when it was released, it was after Led Zeppelin 4, the 4th album, and before Physical Graffiti. So Houses of the Holy is their 5th album. And then the top 2, again, Physical Graffiti number 2, Led Zeppelin Untitled, Led Zeppelin 4 at number 1. So let's get right into this one, because let me know if you guys agree that these are their top 2 albums. However you have it ordered, are these your top 2 albums? Let me know that in the comments. Now, Physical Graffiti, I've got it this high because you look, depending on what you think of the 1-2 punch that kicks off Physical Graffiti, the first 2 tracks, Custard Pie, which is just a blues rock banger in my opinion, and then The Rover, which I think is just, he's got that Celtic folkish like guitar solo like towards the end of the song, which I think is one of the greatest and extremely underrated Jimmy Page guitar solo on, again, track 2, disc 1 from Physical Graffiti, The Rover. Listen to that guitar solo, and that's a song, if we could just join hands, if we could just join hands, if we could just join hands, that's all it takes. Oh man, they just killed The Rover and Custard Pie. Ooh, drop down, baby. Look, I just see this as being the return of Led Zeppelin after Houses of the Holy, just in top form with those first 2 songs. And then they have the extended, an 11-minute song, In My Time of Dying. That's, a Blind Willie Johnson cover. It's a blues rock masterpiece. Oh my Jesus, oh my Jesus. Pretty iconic. So you could argue that they are just on fire with tracks 1 through 3, as I believe that they were on Houses of the Holy as well. And then comes the song Houses of the Holy, which was obviously an outtake from the Houses of the Holy session, but they didn't release it on that Houses of the Holy album. They instead included it on Physical Graffiti, but that's like the 4th song on this album. A lot of people really don't like that song. It's just kind of like a middle of the road, kind of like a goofy-ish, pop-ish song. And yeah, it just, a lot of people don't like Houses of the Holy. It's not, let me take you to the movies. It's not one of my favorite either, but it's track 4, Trampled Underfoot. That's the one with the clavinet, where you've got JPJ, John Paul Jones, playing the, you know, the instrument that Stevie Wonder really made famous with. Think about the opening part of like Superstition or I Wish. That's the instrument that JPJ is playing on the dun 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 dun. So Trampled Underfoot is that song. Talk about love. Some people like it, some people don't. I think it's all right. I don't usually skip that song when I get to it. And then after that is the epic Kashmir to close out basically disc 1 or side 2 if you're looking at a vinyl. Kashmir, 8.5 minutes long. It's such an innovative, creative, groundbreaking song. I mean, I would argue that that is what, arguably the third most iconic Led Zeppelin song, maybe after Stairway to Heaven and Whole Lotta Love. Could you argue that Kashmir is their third most iconic song? I would say so. I would probably say so. So yeah, that's one of those undeniable classics. Everything from the chord progressions to the time signatures. It's just an excellent song. I mean, speaking of time signatures, we're going to get into Black Dog on the beginning of Led Zeppelin 4. So yeah, that's Kashmir. And then disc 2 is pretty debated. I like In the Light. That's the synth keys heavy opener to, you know, side 3 if you're looking at a vinyl, disc 2 if we're talking about CD. I like In the Light. I like its movements. I like the progressions. I like the song. A lot of people don't. It's just, it's not a very Led Zeppelin-like song if you compare it to a lot of their past work. It's not as bluesy as some of their other stuff, but I did like the innovation. I mean, I wasn't around at the time of its release, so I wasn't there to really absorb what the public sentiment was about the song when it came out. But yeah, I really like that one. It's followed by one of my favorite Jimmy Page pieces, Bron E. Yor. That's that guitar instrumental. It's just a 2-minute wordless acoustic piece, and it's absolutely lovely. Like I put it up there with a song by Duane Allman of the Allman Brothers. I think it's an actual Allman Brothers song. I think it might even end the album Eat a Peach. I'd have to go check, but it's called Little Martha. I look at Bron E. Yor, Jimmy Page, and Little Martha by Duane Allman, the Allman Brothers, as being two of my favorite like 2-minute acoustic guitar pieces. Absolute beauty. So yeah, that follows up In the Light. And then you've got the almost country-ish Down by the Seaside, which was a Led Zeppelin 4 outtake. I really like Down by the Seaside. Some people don't love it. I really like that song. So look, at this point, I love tracks 1 through 3 from disc 2 on Physical Graffiti. 10 Years Gone is just a bona fide banger. A lot of people really like that. A lot of people like Night Flight as well. I think that you get more of a mixed opinion on the next 4, the Wonton song, Boogie with Stu, which I actually think is pretty groovy, Black Country Woman, and Sick Again. So there's a lot more to kind of dissect because this is such a long album. I mean, we're talking 82 minutes of runtime. So that's like a double album, even in the CD era. So when you have an album that's this long, there's a lot more to kind of pick in. Like, you might not like the Wonton song, for instance. You might not like a Black Country Woman or something. You might not like In the Light or Down by the Seaside, or as I mentioned, I don't like Houses of the Holy. So then when you get to Led Zeppelin 4 Untitled, which I have at number 1, there are basically no weak spots. It's only 8 songs long. So you've got the tracks 1 and 2, absolute bangers. I look at those 1 and 2 as being just as strong as the Physical Graffiti 1 and 2. So Physical Graffiti, you've got Custard Pie and the Rover. Untitled, Led Zeppelin 4, you've got Black Dog and Rock and Roll. So hey mama said the way you move, like, these are just brilliant songs. And then you've got the, yeah, I mean, just listen to the piano when it comes in, a very almost Jerry Lee Lewis or Little Richard style piano that accompanies Rock and Roll when they're just getting into the second and third verses. It's just riveting stuff. So yeah, bangers. Track 1 and 2, they slow it down. On track 3, The Battle for Evermore, that actually features the only guest vocal in Led Zeppelin's catalog, and that's by the Fairport Convention's Sandy Denny, who lived a very tragic life. Look her up. Sandy Denny, brilliant voice, and she was friends with Robert Plant, so she was included on The Battle for Evermore, track 3. And then you've got Stairway to Heaven, Say No More, right? One of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time, period. Stairway to Heaven is 4. And then you've got Misty Mountaintop, which I like but don't love. And then you've got Four Sticks, which is a little bit more innovative, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more riveting. So I like Four Sticks. I don't love it, but I like it more than Misty Mountaintop. And then you've got Going to California, which I think, aside from that Bront Eeyore guitar instrumental featured on disc 2 on Physical Graffiti, I look at Going to California as being like Led Zeppelin's greatest kind of folky acoustic song. Like, it was almost a tribute to Joni Mitchell in a way. Flower in her hair. I mean, that's kind of what the reference was alluding to. Going to California, just kind of romanticizing that Laurel Canyon, Echo Park, Los Angeles, late 60s, early 70s, but mostly late 60s rock and roll scene. I mean, early 70s too. But yeah, Going to California, that's one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs as well. And then the song that follows it just might be my absolute favorite Led Zeppelin song. And I'm talking about When the Levee Breaks. I mean, that is just, if some of the other stuff like in their early catalog on albums 1 and 2 are blues and blues rock on steroids, I don't even know how to classify When the Levee Breaks. I mean, just the crushing drums, which there's a story behind that based on the venue, the mansion, the old house that they were in. Or was that, I think that was recorded at Headley Grange, actually, the Rolling Stones mobile studio at Headley Grange. I think that's where they recorded it. But yeah, there's a whole story behind, those crushing John Bonham drums that start off When the Levee Breaks. That was, I believe, sampled by Beyonce somewhere on the Lemonade album, if I'm not mistaken. But When the Levee Breaks, it was a cover on a Memphis Mini song, and it was, I believe, about a great flood that took place in the mid 1900s in the South that forced a lot of black folks to migrate from the South up north to like Ohio and other places like Chicago. I think that's what the song references. But to move from the South to the Midwest because of a disastrous flood, I believe that's what that song references. But instrumentally, and just the different movements from the crushing opener to when the vocals finally start well into the song, If It Keeps On Raining, the levee's gonna break, to the down and down, and then it picks up, and then Robert Plant comes in. Don't you make it feel good when you wanna find a way home? Come on. Like, it's just intergalactically good for its time. Like, and it doesn't age. It's not just good for its time. When the Levee Breaks is just crushing, just melt your face off rock and roll, from the guitars to the keys to the vocals. Listen to Robert Plant, and by this point, he had kind of worn out a lot of his vocal ability and his ability to kind of just belt and to howl up in those upper registers, but they just totally pull it off. Brilliant way to close this album, especially the way that it just kind of lingers and slows down towards the end. I'm going down now, and going down. So yeah, I've got Led Zeppelin 4, and to me it's undisputable that this is, because again, Physical Graffiti's got a lot of great stuff, but to me, it's got more weak spots than the untitled Led Zeppelin 4 does. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the Led Zeppelin catalog. How would you rank their first 6 albums? And look, this isn't to totally knock Presence and Into the Outdoor. I just look at the first 6 albums as being noticeably better than the 2 albums that followed. And then, then they had the Coda closing, where it was just a compilation of unreleased songs and so forth to totally close out the Led Zeppelin catalog. But yeah, let me know how you would rank the first 6 Led Zeppelin albums, and do you agree with my rankings or do you disagree? Where do you disagree? Again, I've got Led Zeppelin's debut at number 6, Led Zeppelin 3 at number 5, Led Zeppelin 2 at number 4, Houses of the Holy at number 3, Physical Graffiti, their 6th album, at number 2, and then untitled Led Zeppelin 4 at number 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.